Recording in progress. This episode had been in works for a while. I'm very happy that you took the time, Ronnie, today to sit here together with me and telling us a little bit about yourself. And for those who are not aware of this, Ronnie is my former CEO and founder and boss of Micropsi Industries. And I'm very happy that he took the time, but I would like to give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Yeah. Thanks, Ilya, for the invitation and indulging my vanity. I just learned this is going to be about me, so I get to talk about myself and have justification for it. So that's always nice. Sorry for this taking so long. It's not because I'm so busy; it's because I'm so badly organized. Ronnie Vuine. I am 45 years old to my own perpetual surprise. Co-founded Micropsi Industries 10 years ago. It's my second company. I did a company before that hadn't anything to do with AI or robotics. This was a digital media business back in 2006 or 7 when we started this. However, sort of the AI strain, not the robotics strain, but the AI strain is going way back. And the group of people I did both companies with sort of came out of an AI team at a university. I studied philosophy and computer science. My degree is in philosophy, actually, about a AI-related topic, at least. But much of my past is, around not computer science, but just computers, writing code.
So which year are we talking about when you said this goes way back? You said 2005 and 6, your first company that you built, but when we're talking about the studies and founding the founders and friends that you built the companies together with, and you said university, maybe you can dive a little bit into that. I'm very curious.
Yeah, so let me paint a picture. We obviously didn't know where this was going to go, right? So I was I came from a small town in southern Germany, a very lonely philosophy and computer science student at Humboldt University in Berlin. Philosophy is in the old main building of Humboldt University unter den Linden. So there's lots of history. And you have the Karl Marx quote, supposed to change the world, not just analyze it. In the staircase. A vast opportunity to learn stuff to come into. And then you have computer science, which sits at Berlin-Adlershof, which is in the middle of nowhere. Back then, there wasn't even an airport out there. And computer science was sort of the first of the university institutes that had moved out there, together with the mathematicians. So this was really sort of a future center of science and technology that had very little other than the Institute for Computer Science. And I had no friends in both of my fields because the philosophy guys were terribly arrogant towards somebody who comes from the countryside and does not have a father who's a philosophy professor like all the others. I also found some of them deeply annoying because they carried around big tomes of Nietzsche, which were clearly not carried for the purpose of reading them, but for the purpose
of validation.
Yeah, but this was about showing that you were a Nietzscheaner to the girls, which I found very obnoxious. That didn't help my social standing in that group, and in computer science. This was we are in the year 2000 now, or 1999. So the dot-com bubble was about to burst, but lots and lots of people for the first time were flowing into this. So there's a huge first year of 450 people or so. And it was clear that 80% or so could not survive a Grundstudium, so the first 4 semesters. So it was very tough filtering going on. And just everything was very large, very anonymous. very process heavy. And I was a little prince coming out of a provincial town where I had been a rock star at my high school. Ran the school newspaper, won prizes for doing stuff that the city fund. I was used to getting a bit of attention from the world around me, and Berlin was not giving any attention. Yes, so I was lonely and depressed. This city did not want me. This university did not want me. Everybody was smarter than me. Everybody had richer and more sophisticated parents than I had. So and I had no girlfriend, of course, so not a good time. So in this situation, I discover, just reading through the Vorlesungsverzeichnis, so just a list of stuff you can go to in computer science, that somebody named Joscha Bach was doing a weird course about sort of the philosophy of artificial intelligence. Okay, so here's a computer science guy who does a bit of philosophy, and this combination is unusual. And I was very aware how unusual it was because I had to travel between those two very different places in the city. So I went there, and it absolutely blew my mind. Not just because Joscha was great. I can talk a bit about why that is. But also because everybody else who went there was sort of coming out of a very similar situation. These were sort of nerds that had no other place, people who wrote code but wanted to understand how the mind works, and as computer people, had interests that weren't the Lord of the Rings, but sort of much wider than what sort of the usual cultural framing was for computer science people at the time. So it's just a great group of very inspiring people, and they all flocked towards Joscha Bach, who is a bit of a guru. So Joscha's sort of modus operandi is he will give a talk, and it will be very inspiring, and his eyes will be all bright and light up, and he will fascinate you, and he knows he's doing it. And then you're supposed to be in awe. And because many of the ideas that he will talk about, you have not had yourself. You are actually in awe, and it still works to this day. He still does that. Meaning he has disciples, essentially, right? There's always a group of people who think, wait, how does this person exist? How does he know so much and have these cool ideas? And how is this so different from all the boring stuff? So I went to, I think, 2 of his seminars, and then I think he realized that something great was going on with that group because it was the same people coming again, and we had a great time just reading the stuff he gave us to read and discussing things. This was essentially, so we're in the early 2000s, so this was about, is AI even possible? Can computers think? That was the discussion, right? Is it, or I mean, there's a large school, especially in philosophy, that said, no, it's impossible. Computers will never understand or do anything with language. Brains have special magical powers that will not allow AI to ever actually exist. So this was the debate there. And this group of people just showed up very regularly. Relationships were forming between the students. And then Joscha at some point said, okay, let's do more of this. I'll just invite you to my place once a week, and we'll read books together, right? Everybody reads a chapter, and then you just come to my place and we discuss.
Just as a short interruption question, people might or might not be aware of this, but due to the separation of the city for 30 years, Berlin has more than one university.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And as there is a technical university in Berlin, I studied mechanical engineering over there, which is in the western part of the city. The university you're referring to is in the center of the city. And so normally you would assume that something as computer science would be part of the technical university. So there's a big curriculum, and you can study all kind of degrees at the technical university. Obviously, computer science as well. So I think it is interesting, and mathematics as well, right? So there's a degree that you can do, or a course that you can do on the technical in the technical university. So I think starting already and having these courses at this university is already unique, right? And so maybe
Yeah.
this can be one of the reasons why you guys had been get in contact with this intersection, right?
There was very clearly a form of sort of self-sorting, self-selection going on there. It's true, right? All the three Berlin universities are true universities, so they have the full spectrum, with sort of different specializations. But you can do philosophy, and I did at Technische, or at Freie. And Humboldt is just, I mean, Humboldt is the university of universities, right? It's where it all started. The sort of the model that the world's university, the modern universities are modeled after, where you have the same people doing research and teaching, is started with Humboldt University in many ways. So it's a great tradition going back. It used to be the one university the eastern part of the city had. So especially in philosophy, you had a strong Marxist-Leninist tradition going on there. One of the things these guys were good at was logic. So I got a very good sort of formal logic education from them, which sort of intersected with what was happening at computer science. But indeed, yes. I mean, the other people in that group that sort of flocked around Joscha were just people who had been to elite maths high schools in the East, or I mean, they were all sort of weird people in between the humanities and maths and engineering. So that was very right. This is the university was a place where this kind of happened, and then within that context, so Joscha was sort of the crystallizing personality where that happened between philosophy and computer science, which I had chosen entirely by random, right? I had so going back even further, the combination of those subjects was me having taught myself to code at 15 because I was bored in a village in southern Germany and there was really nothing else to do. And I had played the 5 games I had twice, and then something needed to happen. So that's just how I came to writing code. And I knew I could do that and make some money with it and not be poor. And then because I also found that defensive and boring, I said, let's just add something crazy. And then literally as an accident, when we went to Tübingen to just, there's a southern, very old, famous university town, Tübingen, to just look at a couple of subjects. With a friend, I said, okay, we're going to do computer science. That's clear. What else do we go to? What do we find interesting? And we just put philosophy there. And then we went there, actually missed the bus to the computer science department and came back and said, let's just go through with it. That's what we're going to study now. And that's how it happened. There was no deep thinking or agenda. It was just really a sort of a bit of serendipity that I'd like to add to my life to just so interesting stuff happens.
So you were mentioning Tübingen, but we were talking about Berlin, right? So I mean, let's not dig too deep into it because I think there are some parts of your journey that I'm even more interested in. But so you started at Tübingen and then you went to Berlin, or?
No. Tübingen was just this in Germany. There's this thing called Studienerkundung, where your
Oh
high
yeah,
school
okay.
then sends you to the nearest university to just get a and
Idea
actually
of okay.
yeah to just select a subject. I had actually been sent from the school to University Ulm computer science courses before and some math, just because they thought they could get us interested, and it kind of worked. So I sort of I had so towards computer science, I kind of knew, yeah, that I was not going to be horrible at it, and so that was clear. And then the philosophy thing was a bit of a joke initially, and that just then became something to follow through on.
And you said that even though you had been very lonely, you were now in a situation where you and a few other people had been coming to these lectures or sessions in private very regularly. And so, is this where, yeah, where those companies have their roots in? Maybe
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
continue.
Sort of, yeah. Indeed, all of a sudden, this wasn't just intellectually inspiring. It was just genuinely interesting what we did. Lots of ideas I didn't know existed and were debated, and there were people who were working at this intersection that I sort of had gravitated towards. There was also just real human warmth. Right? It wasn't This wasn't a lonely place all of a sudden. You came to Joscha's place, and he did have a girlfriend, and she was making tea, and she was awesome. And the place was full of books. Joscha's father is an artist, and there was culture, something that is always easy to impress me with. He was a culture teacher. I had culture teachers in high school, and then here finally, somebody to not just learn stuff from, but also to model how to be a human being after, which you need at university, right? You're not a person that knows how to do life, typically. So yeah, this was, I mean, culturally excellent. I mean, I had no access to comic culture before, and I, learned about Möbius from Joscha, and it was just great things from sort of a rich background of Eastern German intellectual culture that this brought, and that the others often were already part of. They felt more at home than I did, I think, in some cases. But yeah, I know it was just, I mean, we became friends. And then me being the twitchy, kind of high energy guy that I, for some reason, am, after some months of reading those books, said, this sounds concrete enough. I will just, bring out Eclipse. I was a Java guy at that time. I will just bring out Eclipse, which is the IDE for Java at the time. And I'll just try to write this AI that this guy in this book talks about. Let me see how far I get. I'll fail somewhere, but it'll be interesting where that is. And then some other people joined in, and we were sort of self-organizing some experimental engineering. This is really what it is, right? It's not science. You have some ideas about how to build a mind, and then you put them in code, and then you see what happens. So it's, I guess, speculative engineering or something like that. And that was fun. It was just great fun. I spent nights doing this, living off like 4 Milka Kuhflecken chocolate bars a day, and some pizza and lots of Coca-Cola. And doing very little else. I wasn't studying much. It was just too much fun. And then sort of that created a little group of people that sort of people knew Joscha had those guys who did that. And then when he went from Humboldt to Osnabrück, and he finished his PhD in Osnabrück, town in northern Germany that has a cognitive science focus.
Mhm.
And cognitive science is, of course, where we were much more at home than in computer science, because cognitive science is supposed to be the mixture, sort of the intersection of philosophy, psychology, brain sciences, and computer science. So he moved there and finished his PhD there. And then some students there, the Joscha effect happened. And then he just had disciples, like he had us in Berlin. And then, of course, he wanted the groups to meet. And then I met those guys, and they were great as well. And from these two groups, sort of friendships, or at least relationships, formed. And then when Joscha and I said, let's do a company together, uh, we don't really see ourselves working corporate jobs. And doing this AI in science is going to be hard, because none of us is a professor yet. So we would have had a chance to other people's research, but our own, you're not, that this is hard. So we said, okay, let's do a company instead. So at least we'll be independent and maybe rich, and then we can do this AI thing. And then from the group of people we spent our time with, We just asked around, Joscha asked around and said, who wants to join, right? We'll attempt to do a company when you're finished with your jobs. Let's do one. And then we did one and it failed. And that's sort of the relationships that were built in that constellation carry the company to this day in some aspects.
You said that Micropsi Industries now exists for 10 years. And I remember that we had a few talks about this, about the early stages of the product, and you just said something as some sort of engineering that you guys were doing. But maybe you can go back to the early stages when you were trying to, I mean, because when I talk to founders, very often the question comes up, especially people are very deep in academia, and then derive from their project a company or a spin-off. But very often the question comes, do you have a tool, do you have a solution, and now you're looking for a problem? Or, which is very often not necessarily better, but if you have a problem that you're about to solve, and now you're applying your knowledge, your resources, your time and effort towards solving that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how this came together, and yeah.
So first of all, I need to stress we were not academics. I mean, even the ones with academic titles aren't really researchers, or only in a sense of science and research that is much older than what is sort of the current paradigm. We were really crazies. This was really just experimentally doing stuff and seeing what happens, right? That's not science. There's no empirical subject you're studying if you're doing this. So this was really, I mean, and of course, the university, at least it used to be a great place to do something like that, because you have sort of the weird people who are interested and you have the intellectual stimulation and all that. But science as a system, as a sort of subsystem of society today, does not actually encourage this type of stuff much. So part of why we said it needs to be a company is because it was already then quite clear that it's not science, and universities don't really, and this is understandable, don't really have a place for this. Maybe we need to just find a way to make money and finance our interests, right? So that was part of that. And so there is also no real science to business transfer going on here. I mean, first of all, because the first company we did wasn't about AI at all. It was just a way of at least being independent and maybe making some money and spending time together, rather than and doing something we found interesting. There's digital books at that time, but we had no idea how to sort of commercialize AI. Certainly, the type of AI which was very much about, what is intelligence actually, and how does personality come about, and what are emotions? Why do they exist, right? In the Western culture, we treat emotions as this sort of disturbance to our rational minds, right? So in the West, we sit there and we have these thinking machines in our head, and they produce truth from truth if they just do all the logical deductions correctly. And then emotions come and they disturb this, and then you do a stupid thing. If that would be the case, nature would have killed emotions long ago, right? So they must be good for something. And understanding what that is and why they exist and what they do with cognition, none of this you can, put in a computer and then make money with. At least I haven't figured out how to do that. It's not immediately useful. It's just something that we found interesting. Yeah, so how did we end up creating a company? This was really, we were a bit desperate. I mean, this is just, at this point, it's mostly Joscha and me. We were a bit desperate about our future at universities, because it was clear we're just too weird for that. And maybe we can find a place for 2 years or so, but and then, we had offer from sort of defense corporates. It's a separate story, a very funny story, to sort of do this type of stuff for them. And I didn't particularly want to do this at this time. And I had seen corporate life from the inside, and didn't much like it. So we were essentially creating a company because that sounded like the best way to be weird. And I had a friend who worked. This is check your privileges. Here's my privilege. I had a friend who used to work at a venture capital fund a couple months earlier. That's where his first job after university was. His family is three generations of successful German businessmen who know other super successful German businessmen. So he knew how to behave in the business world. So he got a job at a venture capital firm as an analyst in the early 2000s. And he taught me essentially how to play that game. So I said to Joscha, yeah, let's not do, this was something we discussed, let's not do just a shop somewhere in Berlin where we sell e-readers. I think I know how to, raise venture capital. Let's do that. And then we created a pitch deck, and we went pitching. And then I remember the moment when we met our first investor. She's been investing in the first company and also in Micropsi Industries, and she made money in both, by the way. I'm very proud of that. Then we met a second team in Berlin that was doing essentially the same thing we were attempting to do. They were just much more senior. They had sold a company before, so super senior people, and one of them sort of became my startup mentor. So we decided, they were rich and had an idea for a company that was essentially the same idea for a company that we had. But when you're rich and you've just sold a company, it's kind of nice if guys who are 15 years younger than you show up and are eager to do some work. So I think they like that. So they said, let's just join forces. You'll get a part of the company. We'll get a part. We bring the experience. You bring the energy levels. And that's how that happened. And then Christoph Mehr, sort of a known Berlin angel, was part of that group. And I learned what matters when you play the game, right? The pitching part, the raising the money part is one thing, but then you actually need to do the company. And you need to see it through. And much of what we've been doing since, I sort of learned from Christoph. And it's, you can't, this is not deep knowledge. It's just stuff like, you do not give up, right? This will be frustrating. For 3 years, everybody tells you it's a stupid thing that you're doing. And if you just keep doing it, it will eventually work. And if you give up, it won't. And that's a large part of how you do this stuff.
A few weeks ago, I asked you if you would give advice to younger tech founders. Do you think there's a few topics or a few key elements or keywords, key lessons that you think would be very valuable? And I remember this was part 3, and that you added to this that you still hope it's true. So we're talking about grit and perseverance. So really sticking with things and not giving up. So, and you, yeah, it's funny that you're now coming up with this. So it seems like a continuity in your thoughts. And
Yeah, it
when
is.
you, yeah, I mean, at the very end, failing can be part of this, right? You just need to. You don't think so?
What even is failure, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I was just about to say, if you understand that
one
this,
part of why I am sort of kind of hesitant to give advice to younger people, because this should be done by successful people. I am, by some measure, I guess, right? The company has existed, but we haven't sold the company. And in venture capital, if you haven't sold the company, you're not a success. You're just spending other people's money. So,
true.
I mean, I haven't sold a company. I just keep playing the game, and arguably it works better every month. I think that is true. But so I'm careful with the advice. But if you want to play that game, this much I can say. Not expecting rewards early. In fact, everybody telling you that you chose a particular difficult thing to do, and it's kind of stupid because there are easier things to do that pay better. That will be part of that experience. Yes, if you want to live that life, deciding on a thing and then doing the thing until the world will not let you do it anymore is a large part of what the successful guys I hear, that's what they've been telling me, will say what makes it happen. And being right a lot. That's the other advice that isn't really helpful, right? I think Elon Musk said that successful people are right a lot.
I mean, it's a filter, right? But in the very end, if you don't have this, you don't get the opportunities to become right more often than not, right? If you don't stick with it long enough, you're not you don't have a chance at all, right? And you said about choosing life. I mean, we do need to spend our times anyways, right? And if this is something that someone is seeking, then it might be worth spending the time with, right? And even though you might not be a success in selling or not selling Micropsi Industries, throughout the years I was part of Micropsi Industries for 2 years, and I consider this as a very valuable time meeting interesting people and forming friendships. So
It's a
this is
great
not
company.
something that goes away, right? I mean, the money
Yeah.
goes away at some point, and not, but those charts, how we spending our time with, right? And
Yeah.
you are spending a very big chunk of your time with your colleagues, so it might be you're doing something that you like and spending it with people that you like and think alike, right?
And that's a large part of why I'm doing this, right? I mean, there's of course there's sort of high level, slightly pretentious stuff about creating the future and making certain things happen that I do believe in. That these are real, and that's why I chose this field and the things we are doing, right? Even if you're doing AI, you don't need to do industrial robotics. That's a deliberate choice we made. And it wasn't sort of an opportunity that presented itself. It was a choice because it's a good world to be in because what we do there really deeply matters. For so much of how we live our lives is downstream from this world, silently in the background, just delivering reliably all the time. So that's what got me into that field. But all this macro motivation, purpose stuff aside, a large part of doing your own company or joining a company where you feel aligned with the culture is that anybody who is not happy lying on their backs looking at TikTok, but wants, wants to do stuff, spends so much time with work. Right? I mean, there's this depressing part of internet culture right now where they treat work as essentially us selling time to sort of corporations, and it's all about selling it slightly more smartly to them so you get a bit more out of them than they do, right? And if that's your life, that's a choice you made. Do not make that choice, right? If you don't want this life, don't live it. Do not blame capitalism. That's nonsense. At least in the West, at least in a company that's as rich as Germany. Okay, right. I had some privileges. That is true. Slightly easier for me to say than for many other people. But no, you have choices. You
Yeah.
can try stuff, and nothing bad happens if it fails. So when you make this choice of what you spend your energy on, what it is that you do in the world, you might as well do it with full force and with full conviction, and choosing the people around you.
You know this, and I said this in private a few times, and you mentioned this today. It's energy. I'm always connected to people with high energy. I consider myself someone with high energy as well, and finding people who share this kind of passion, let's say call it passion maybe, and really not this is work. I need to do it, but I want to do this. As you said, it's a choice, right? It's worth spending it with things that you're interested in. When you said that out of this group, you started to form this company, and then you deliberately choose manufacturing or robotics, industrial robots, and with this background in philosophy and early stages of AI, how did you guys were able to, and now getting a little bit more into the technical part of the story, maybe, how did you guys came up with what you're doing today? Maybe you can, maybe for those who don't know Micropsi, how dare you? maybe you can summarize what you guys doing and what is the idea behind the product.
Yeah. So we're a software company that gives a tiny sliver of autonomy to industrial robots so they can take over from humans. Um, and if you give autonomy to robots, and you're doing this in manufacturing, so that's where this happens, is the cars and fridges and computers are being built with our product. So in manufacturing, there are two things that need to be true. Otherwise, you don't have manufacturing, you have a lab. And these are whatever the robot does, it needs to be exactly what you want it to do. And it needs to do it for 7 years without getting different ideas. Every single minute, every single second, it does it reliably. If a human needs to show up and correct it, that's a big catastrophe, especially in automotive. If that happens, it's catastrophe. So how do you introduce autonomy in a world that is like that? Because that seems to be antagonistic, right? How do you give a robot a choice and then you want it to do the same thing and it's exactly what you want it to do? And yes, these are antagonists. What we essentially found is a way to define the space of autonomy that the robot has, where it is supposed to make a decision or adapt to how the material is presented, how something moves, while still never going outside of the briefing and doing the task very precisely. So that's what we do. How did we arrive there? We had an interest in, that's sort of what we carried forward from the Joscha Bach days, an interest in systems that don't use techniques of machine learning or artificial intelligence to do a certain thing. And the certain thing is known when you develop the system. And then you use the neural network to train it to do the thing. And then you deliver the neural network to your customer who needs to do the thing, right? That is the thing. That is what we didn't want to do because that's boring. You're essentially just using a neural network to solve a problem you know beforehand. What we were interested in is how do you build a system that does not know what to do when it leaves our office? That self-adapts or can be adapted by teaching it to do all sorts of things, because then you have some form of intelligence system. At least you have a learning system. And it, of course, opens up many, many things you can do with it if you do that. So that's what we brought. That's what was interesting. I sort of have an interest in how do you represent knowledge, and I was hoping that that would be part of the story. And of course, the large language model guys have by now largely invalidated everything anybody in this space ever wanted to do. There's some indication that the neurosymbolic stuff needs to come back, but it needs to come back in a differentiable form. So what we did, which we were never smart enough math-wise to make it differentiable. So you couldn't do gradient descent learning on it. Anyway, so we were doing a bit of a search movement in the early days of the company. So when we raised the first money, we raised it from somebody who saw, okay, here's a team who have been business people before. They know how to run the business and won't just implode after 4 weeks. So there's a bit of experience here. And they are genuine AI people. They have no plan what they want to do, but this is really a team that has been, that AI is why they know each other. AI is what they want to do. And this early investor is just very good at spotting teams like that very early on. So he invested in us. He invested in DeepL, which is the German generative language AI success story. He just sold Big Rep. So this is 3D printing. He's in Live.io. That's sort of satellite coverage for the whole planet for everybody. So he's very good at spotting good teams early. That's sort of his super skill and giving them
Can
some.
you name any names?
Yeah, this is Christian Reitberger in München. Matterwave Ventures is his fund. Great fund. They do great stuff. Okay. And incidentally, that is, he used to work for Wellington Partners, which is the fund that my friend who I learned venture capital from did his first, right? Is some of the, yeah. Here, this is the privilege, right? There's not much else, but this is the privilege, getting to know Christian Reitberger. And so he essentially gave us the freedom for a year to just search, right? I said, we're going to apply a set of ideas in a German context, so it's going to be industry in some form. Let us develop these ideas a bit in terms of software, and let us look around together what we could find. And then we did a couple things that actually worked. There was reinforcement learning on factories that create MDF. So that's medium density fiber. That's sort of a sort of particle, very tiny particles, particle board that your laminate floors are made of. And these things use a lot of energy and glue when you create them. And we were optimizing the use of energy and glue using machine learning on live, real actual plants. That worked, but I learned much too much about making wooden products doing that, because we essentially turned into consultants for that particular industry. And that's great if you just want to have an interesting life. It's very international. It's a cool world, but it does not support a venture-backed industry, a venture-backed startup, right? You need to scale much more than to this small industry, which has like 50 plants worldwide or so. So we were looking further, and then the robotics thing that went on at the time was cobots. So robots that are less dangerous, less fast, and slightly smaller, but much more easy to program than traditional industrial robots. That was just happening around the time we were looking. So this was 2015, 16. And both these guys, Christian and Christoph Mehr, who I was also talking about what I was now doing at the time, pointed out you should have a look at robotics if you're doing AI. That sounds like there might be something. And then there were a bunch of very bad ideas about what to do with robotics. And I said, okay, I'm not going to do any of those things. And then what I did was I pretended I wanted to buy a robot, went to one of the manufacturers and said, okay, now show me the AI capabilities of that thing. And I said, what do you mean? It can go there and it can do this. There's nothing. All the science fiction about intelligent robots I have read and seen is bunk. It doesn't exist. I said, yeah, pretty much. Unless you consider taking a measurement with a camera AI, but there's no real-time generation of motions for robots. Nobody does this. And I said, okay, if that's useful, I think we can build that. And then a second connection that kind of happened at this time. I need to take a step back. Bear with me; it'll be worth it. So when you're a startup that does something interesting in Berlin, people will be interested in you because you're a very curious thing. You're somebody doing innovation in Germany. That is rare. You're so confident and probably so rich or whatever it is that you dare not to have a corporate career, but do something. That already puts you in a place where you're, especially if you've raised some seed funding, people are interested in you. And the people who are interested in you are the managers of large corporates. Because in Germany, innovation, right? The Americans do this differently. They create startups and then they sell them to corporates or they go under. And then they let the corporates who buy the wrong startups go bust. That's essentially how the American system works. In Germany, we do it differently. We pretend the corporates can do corporate innovation. So they will have an innovation department and they pay lots of money to researchers and they write lots of patents. And then for some reason, you have the same company for 200 years doing innovation inside those companies. They're not buying startups, at least not at scale. Now that engine is hard to keep going in the current world because first of all, the Chinese and the Americans and the Israelis are just outpacing you because the startup system is faster than what the Germans do. And also, the incentives are all messed up. Because if you're a corporate, you have a business that you know how to run. It just keeps producing money. All you need to do is keep it alive. So all the people you train are trained to keep that thing alive and keep it going and not make any major mistake. And that's the type of people you get. Now, how do you get them to do a crazy thing? Okay, so corporate managers who understand this, not all of them do, but some do, got very interested and said, oh, we need to meet a couple startup people and learn this magic from them. What is it? Is it the green walls? Is it the new work furniture? Is it not wearing a tie? What is it? Tell us. And the way to ask the startup world is there used to be, I don't know if they're still around, there's a bunch of agencies that make these connections and that introduce you to these people. And one of them was close to Axel Springer, who were the German corporate who was supposed to be very good at being digital and innovative. And some of the Springer people were making this a business to just show German corporates some Berlin I mean, not unicorns in the sense of valuation, but in the sense of some colorful people in Berlin that do innovation. So somehow I don't even know how that happened. I met the Springer people, and then they kept just inviting me to events where the management of some of the German corporates would show up and have conversations with the founders. So very good food, usually good conversations, very interesting. And some people from Audi showed up there, and I got their card after one of those dinner conversations. And then I wrote the guy and said, I want to do something in robotics, probably not your field. He was managing something else entirely. Can you just point out the guy that I need to talk to about robots? And he did. And then I wrote an email to the guy and said, I can do magic with robots, but I don't know what to do. Can I come and look at your factory? And he said, yeah, obviously, great, do so. So I went, and then we walked through the Audi factory in Ingolstadt, and to get pointed at people and said, why is that not a robot? Why is not a robot doing this task? And then he explained it to me, and then I took a note, and then I took it back and said, can we do these things? Because then we can do things with robots that today they use people for. And that's the product we built. Very grateful to Springer and Audi for letting me do this.
I really love this story. And like this curiosity and shamelessly being shameless and just letting the curiosity and the will to do something drive you, right? So why should I not be able to write this guy? He gave me the card, right? Why should I not be able to ask him, right? And this not always works out, but there's some of this that you do need to have. You're not
Yes.
agreeing?
Yeah, I do. And this is hard. I mean, particularly for me, who is as introvert as they come. Right. I can't talk to people. I don't know how to do this if there's not a sort of a accepted social role. So this is really hard for me. But one of the learnings, here's a true learning from having done this for a couple of years. And it's true outside of business as well. Write the email. Write the email. People, I mean, okay, maybe they don't respond. But often they pick up who's on the other side of their communication channel, right? Often they will see that whatever else, there was enough interest and knowledge to put together that email and ask a question that might sound relevant. Everybody is desperate for somebody to talk to. People are waiting for this email. If you're at all genuine, right? If you're just trying to sell some weak shit, then of course it won't work. But if you're genuine, if you're somebody, if there's something you want to do, write the email. Yeah, you won't get responses from everybody. You'll get responses from somebody, and then stuff happens. That is a pattern. That is true. People are so much more interested in what you're trying to do if it's not just the standard shit. That usually works.
So the very first time I got in contact with Micropsi Industries was actually just this kind of I don't know how you said this before, but so you have corporate on one side and then you have startups on one side, and this in between was very hot for a few years. And this is where I was connecting corporates and startups, and so Micropsi Industries was one of my clients at that time. And so I was working for BSH back then. So one of the big first deployments that Micropsi Industry had was with BSH in Spain. I was the project manager on that project, and I got in contact with you guys. And yeah, it was very interesting, and I really liked the idea of helping corporates to identify those startups, right? I mean, not very often things come out of it, because it is very hard to get to a certain level where corporate is able to deal with you actually. And as the timeline is always very long, much longer than a startup would like it to have. not every startup is able to survive, right? So you do need to have a few you do need to have a few projects in place that is short term and midterm, but one of the few long terms are most likely corporates. And I've seen this over and over again. It takes time to really get into place, get the scope, the technology, the project. Is it a POC? Does the POC really leads into a sold unit or whatever, or sold service, whatever it is? And especially in this AI robotics hype we are in for a few years now already. There's a lot of expectation management that needs to be done, right? What is AI, and can AI really solve my problems? As you said, who has been in AI and coming from AI? So this is what you're doing in the plant, in the factory, in the manufacturing side. So even you were surprised by what is happening. How far is automation? How far is robotics and AI in the automotive industry or in industry in general. So this was how I got in contact with Micropsi Industries. If you're looking forward now, as you see more and more companies are entering the game, and I write you every now and then regarding the all the humanoid companies that are exist and that are popping up. I think this year alone was 20. And we have a little bet going on. We're not disclosing this because we don't want to name any companies. But now that I've joined Nora Robotics, we do have a humanoid in place as well. We're trying to build one, and we see what's happening around us. Maybe you are able to share a bit about your thoughts on what's happening at the moment, and what do you see yourself in that bubble?
Yeah. So first of all, this is for us as a company, it's sort of a surprise development that we didn't see coming. The whole humanoid stuff, right? Where does that come from? Why does it even exist? Because it's not a sort of technological opening that drives this. It's not that a great invention was made that makes humanoid robots suddenly possible. That's not what happened. It is confidence that has changed. I think what has given people who wanted to build humanoid robots forever. I mean, we had people in Berlin who did that. I studied with what's Manfred's last name? He's now at Beuth. But I mean, he built humanoid robots back when I was a student at Humboldt. So great. We've always been at it because they're fascinating. So what moved that out of a weird academic hobby and into startup land? What made that confidence happen? I think it's the progress in language processing, oddly, because these things are entirely unrelated. Right? Moving a body with lots of movable parts is much different than predicting the next token in a sentence. There's nothing. This does not overlap technologically at all. But I mean, the Chat GPT effect of boosting the confidence in AI and what's possible, certainly fueled by NVIDIA being an interested party with great performance in the stock market, sort of built that confidence that something major has happened and it is now worth having the hardware because we will have the software to drive it. I think that's what happened, and probably the first to latch onto this, and as he's very good at this, sort of capturing this moment of intellectual pop culture, is Elon Musk. But he runs a car company with an aging product palette, and his car company's valuation is crazy high compared to other car companies who also make very good cars. So he needs to be more than a version of Mercedes with batteries and slightly better software. Right? He needs to be a technology company like Meta. Meta has always had this problem, right? They're still trying to figure out how to be a technology company because they have social networks, but they keep dying. And if you're a hyperscaler and you're going to be part of the big five for good, you need to be a technology company. So Tesla is finding this. right? And I think Elon Musk's part of this strategy is to say, yeah, I mean, we're doing cars, but we're also doing batteries, and also we're doing humanoid robots, which is a type of, which is a way of combining mechanical stuff and batteries to do something awesome, and AI, which is also something that they're good at because they do autonomous driving, right? So a couple of ideas come together that kind of makes sense for Tesla. Now, this comes from a company that has famously been burned using industrial robots, the traditional stuff, the stuff you also find at Audi. But Tesla didn't manage to use it at the scale that Elon Musk predicted. He famously bought lots of robots, they didn't deliver, and now he needs to make his cars in a tent. I've been to the tent, it's still there. So they are skeptical about even industrial robots as they exist today at Tesla. And yet, they go out and say there will be humanoids. We're going to make them. The stock market has something to do with it. Elon Musk does these things where he sets very ambitious goals and presents them as achievable. He did this with Mars. He did this with self-driving cars. He's now doing it with humanoid robots. And every time he does this, because he is who he is, and his companies are valued at what they are valued, and because, let's not forget, only Elon Musk has Starlink, and only Elon Musk has a space program that the Americans can use right now, just because of the general awesomeness of his stuff. With all the shit he talks lately, which annoys everybody who is kind of impressed by what he's built. Whenever he does something like that, it creates a buzz and it creates interest in following this. That's not to say it's nonsense. It is just saying that some of these things happen very quickly, but we haven't landed on Mars. We're not even spending our time sleeping in self-driving cars. It's going to be a while. So I think anybody who now looks at humanoids needs to accept that before they become useful, it will be a while. Why is that? Because they're hideously complicated. To mimic the sort of movability we have in our soft, wobbly bodies with rigid metal parts, you need to put lots of rigid metal parts in place and lots of servos. And all these servos need to be controlled, and they need to be well oiled all the time, but not too well oiled, so the oil doesn't leak out when they get hot. Robots are hard to make work, and they are insanely hard to make work reliably. So when you go into manufacturing, that will be true for Elon's robots, and it will be true for Neura's robots, and it will be true for everybody else as well. You try to reduce the engineering complexity of what you're doing to something you know will deliver for 7 years, right? That those two things I have said, in addition to the autonomy earlier on, it needs to do exactly what you want it to do, and it needs to do it consistently for many years. So you're doing away with everything you don't absolutely need to do that. And this is why, ceterum censeo, legs are stupid. Because we're not doing car assembly in the savannah of Africa, while also doing some hunting gathering on the same hardware. We really just want to make a car. And the wheel has been invented. And the floor in the factory is flat. So unless you're doing a use case where the robot sort of jumps into a car and does some leaning into it, and then you do some complex balancing, if you use the legs essentially for getting around, use a wheel instead, because you are operating against gravity with energy that you need to carry in a battery that is barely good enough to actuate everything else you have. And you're bringing lots of stuff that will break. Anybody who brings legs to a problem where a wheel is good enough is a fraud or stupid or has a 30-year plan. So to the credit of all the people who build humanoid robots right now, let's assume they have a 30-year plan.
Let's assume. Let's assume. I mean, we have another European startup that is doing humanoids with wheels, right? So 1X is doing fairly good. And as you said earlier, the Americans and the Chinese especially, everyone is pushing really hard on this high topic.
Have you
The
seen
main
Let me interrupt you there. The Chinese have been pushing and copying Spot, the Boston Dynamics robot dog. And there's like, I think, 50 copies of Spot that come out of China. If you go to any sort of community event in robotics or to any trade show, everybody has a robot dog. Have you seen any? I mean, we were struggling to make them work commercially or in any meaningful form. Because
Robotics?
I mean, yes, you have use cases where you need to be on the ground, so you can't fly. And there's stones and grass and stuff on the ground. So this exists. They exist, but they're rare. For many of the use cases where they're, I mean, as cool as they are, use a wheel or use a flying thing instead. You need legs if you're going around in terrain. If that's what you're doing, then yeah, legs are the right choice. If you're doing it because legs are cool, it makes no sense, even if it's a dog.
I do like the skepticism on one side, but on the other side, your enthusiasm regarding the push that is happening at the moment. And I mean, you're already saying it, right? I mean, the majority of things that are happening take time, right? They take time, and sometimes I just read this yesterday. I think it was it's in the bio of a very well-known entrepreneur, and he says sometimes it takes decades for things to happen, and then within months, decades happening, right? And
Yeah.
let's see what comes out of this hype. We were talking about the high valuation of or raising money from Figure AI and how much they actually need this to even get to the next steps. How German automotive is in collaboration with these. But I mean, this brings it too far away, and I think there might be another podcast episode to that.
Let me just add, some things take time. Some things are really bad ideas. There's a reason
Yeah.
there aren't any flying cars. And I don't think Hyperloop will exist because it's a very bad idea. Right? Some things they sound very futuristic, and we have pop culture tropes associated with them. But there's no point in making it work. You can do it, but there are better solutions that aren't what pop culture gave us as our default expectation. I'm not saying humanoid robots are that, because at some point when they live where people live, where you need legs, it does make sense. It's just starting to build cars with them is what I'm highly skeptical about. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, this goes into the other direction. For me, it's always interesting to have people who are telling us a little bit about themselves and how they got into robotics and what are they doing within the field of robotics, and but also what is coming for you. So you said that at the moment there's some. I mean, yeah, there's a hype around humanoids. Micropsi Industries is not into building machines or robots or robot arms or humanoids. It's a software company. So, do you would like to maybe in a few sentences what would you guys have in plan or have in mind if you're able to share something?
This is what's coming.
Mhm.
Yeah. So let's just continue with the theme, right? Let's assume the humanoids exist. They can be built, and let's assume there is a business case for them. We are going to provide the autonomous movements that they make, right? The interaction between sensors and motion that is reliable enough to actually let the robot be autonomous is essentially our playing field. And we do this in manufacturing because that's where the money is right now. And that's where you keep yourself honest. If you're not solving manufacturing, you're not right. The real world is much harder than manufacturing. Manufacturing is a semi-controlled environment. So that's what you need to solve first. And then, beyond that is the rest of robotics. So, but in any world that is full of robots, whatever your theory about the future is, right? You have a future that is full of robots. The movements that these robots make will not be programmed by humans by hand, by giving sort of directions to where the servos should go and placed. The movements are going to be generated in real time from sensory data. And this company is all about picking up this relation very quickly and very reliably between what is being perceived and what the sort of motor reaction to that is. So, and then you can build stuff on top, right? You can add a language model to give directions to the robot. You can even add our own old emotion stuff and build an emotional robot because it is useful for energy management, separate topic. So none of this is our immediate next step. Right now, we are about scaling in the domains that we're active in. And that is all about the question how deep the manufacturing rabbit hole is. Because you go down that rabbit hole, and at various points you'll think, okay, now I'm reliable enough to be in a factory. And then the world tells you you're not. Right? We haven't fully made it to the bottom of the rabbit hole. We have at Tesla, we have at Mercedes, we haven't fully at some other of our automotive customers who are just doing things where the margin of error is even lower than what we've already done. And as you know, these things get exponentially harder the closer you get to those last percent, right? So right now, much of the innovation that's happening around our product is all about these, you want autonomy, but you want it to do exactly what you want, and you want to do it forever. The forever part is the hard part. And much of the innovation that now happens is around that. And then, of course, there's the fun part where we actually add exciting features. The next family of features that is going to be added to the product, which will be immediately super useful to our manufacturing customers and which fits into this autonomy context, is enabling the robot to make decisions. These are decisions that you tell them what outcomes you want for the decisions, but it will essentially not just use its sensors to tune their motions to the world, but you will be able to essentially build complex decision trees that they use their sensors for, the same sensors that they use to make the motions, and the same neural networks that are informed from what motions they want to make these decisions. So that is something that is coming. We have first good results of using all the data we've collected over many years to do foundational models that allow you to arrive at decision-making capabilities very quickly. And that's what the research at Micropsi Industries currently is about. And then a couple of mundane things that are also machine learning related. We're not sort of the best choice in some cases for picking things. There are specialized, more highly engineered optical systems that do that better in some cases and then annoys us. We would just like to beat these guys as well. So that's something where work is ongoing.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that you not only gave us insights in the person Ronnie, but also in the company as well, because as you said, I mean, these topics are very hard to translate, not only in a lab, but really bringing them into production, really being reliable, really being forever there, right? If a line stops at BMW, that costs 30K per minute, right? So
I don't think that's it's millions per minute. It's it is.
should.
Yeah, I mean, automotive OEM Aufbauwerke, General Assembly at automotive is just the most. I mean, it's insane how expensive any minimum mistake is.
So you don't want any second to be wasted. I do hope that we will work together in the future, because we do share some people behind the scenes, so to speak.
We share investors and interests, and we seem to like what the other company is doing. So yes.
Yes, I'm very happy, Ronnie, that you took the time today. We do share some other interests. We are talking about in private, but yeah, thanks for the insights, and thanks for giving the unique perspective of you, especially because I had a few engineers. I had a few people that are building companies, people that are really deep into the tech. But I think you're the first one who came up with with this kind of background, with this kind of history. And yeah, I'm happy that you were talking about these kind of struggles in the early days. And so because they are private struggles, right? But you're not the only person who made had been in that kind of situation. So thanks for sharing, because I would like to people to listen to this and think, okay, maybe my story is not. I'm not so lonely. I'm not the only one who feels like that. And maybe if this guy can do it, who is a bit
Whatever it is
crazy,
that he's doing, yes.
yeah, you can do it too, right? And I think this is what I can transfer with this podcast. But yeah,
Have a good life. The rest of it is downstream.
okay, this is a good motto. Thanks, and talk to you in the future.
Yes, we will. Looking forward to it. Thanks for listening to me go on about AI and robots and myself for almost an hour.